This is
Make It Plain.
Make it plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Almost time for the run for the roses again, a really big deal and an exciting time in American culture and history and sports. As a kid, it was something to watch those 60 seconds of excitement. Grew up in Nashville, not far from Louisville, knew folk who used to go to Louisville for the Derby and shared it with my children. I've never been. But it's always an exciting day. Later in life, I learned, ladies and gentlemen, why lawn jockeys were often black. And of course, then learned that and in the early days, all jockeys were African American.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and there was you all know one of our venerable publications, magazines that went out of business was Emerge, and they did two covers. One was with Clarence Thomas with a handkerchief on his head. It's very controversial, but it went viral before viral was a word because it wasn't social media yet. And then the second cover they did was Clarence Thomas as a lawn jockey. And so lawn jockeys came to symbolize African-American memorabilia, akin to minstrelsy and whatnot. And so I never could, and many of us who were enlightened by that, never could quite look at the Kentucky Derby quite the same way. Still, great to see the horses, beautiful creations of God, but still, it's just something about it, the mint juleps, all of that. Well, my guest today doesn't help because she has a book to tell us even more about the history of Kentucky and the song that we hear. She is the visiting honors faculty fellow at Bellarmine University. She's written for Vogue, Ohio Valley History, the Journal of Southern History, Newsweek, the Wall Street Journal, the New England Review. She's published several books, but her latest we want to talk about today on Make It Plain, and we welcome her. Emily Bingham, her book, My Old Kentucky Home, The Astonishing Life and Reckoning of an Iconic American Song. Emily, welcome to Make It Plain. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm really so excited to share this with you and see how you react to this and the kind of questions you're bringing. Already, you're asking me about things that nobody's asked me about yet, and I am super, super excited to go into it.
Well, first of all, is it really okay for you to write this book and still live in Kentucky? I mean, is that wise?
Well, I've gotten some people have expressed some concern for my I don't know, my comfort, I suppose. But I'm a very lucky person. I love my state. I feel like this is part of how we love, and how we love is to be honest. Sometimes sometimes it takes a long, hard look, and our past has been deeply whitewashed, and that's something that I feel a responsibility to understand and help others understand.
Well, and then actually, it's kind of in your blood, isn't it? Don't you I understand you come from a journalism family?
I do. So my family has deep roots here in Kentucky. They owned media properties here for about 75 years, starting in the early 20th century. And then they were all sold. So I did not grow up being part of it, as professionally, but I grew up with it certainly in my blood and the conversation in terms of what mattered. And what mattered surely was, holding up a mirror to ourselves as people and as citizens, and whether that's the Kentucky Derby or coal mining or school desegregation. I mean, these are all things that were constantly in the family discussions around the dinner table. What wasn't talked about a whole lot was, some of the more difficult things in our own past, and that included slave owning. So I'll get that out there right now. And, it's probably just the expected demeaning way that some people were treated even long after slavery ended. So that's been something I've been trying to reckon with in my own life for many years.
So your family owned slaves?
Well, yeah, going back on both sides, my mother's side and my father's side. And as a historian, that's something I've taken seriously to try to understand and get a better grip on. In North Carolina and in the Washington, D.C., Virginia area.
Does writing a book like this, does that help you with your own reckoning?
It helps in the sense, I think, that I'm not going to perpetuate that sort of silence or just not talking about it a lot to the next generation. I know for sure that my kids are going to know, and all my cousins and siblings' kids are going to know. That's never going to be a secret they're not going to be aware of. And so when these discussions about race today come up, they are not going to be able to imagine that nothing they have has anything, or nothing they experience has is totally separate from that history.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being forthcoming about that. One, as we are all in this conversation about reparations, but two, what you're doing with the book. It's one thing to be in Kentucky, Emily, but obviously, as you know, there's this whole debate around stopping CRT, which is really something else, because CRT's never been taught in elementary and secondary school. This is about ending the accurate teaching of history. And your book kind of flies in the face of that movement and what Fox News is trying to do.
Well, I have a PhD in American history, and even I wasn't taught CRT. I think
Right.
I know what they're doing. It's a clever move. We need to just talk about history in this country. Let's just say it. I mean, there's nothing CRT or mysterious about that. There's no acronym for it. We just need to be honest with one another and have real conversations and hear one another. I mean, what I'm conscious of in the last 15 or 20 years, what's different and what I think is provoking this backlash is that Black people in this country are not as restrained as they were for so many years, including my own growing up. And so, wow, it's pretty surprising when people who look like me actually are being asked to listen and not just ignore voices that have been, shuttered and constrained and told not to speak up, or else you might not keep your job. I mean, that's still a risk today, but that's becoming even a tiny risk for someone like me in a state like Kentucky. But I think that's all backlash to, the fact that we are changing somewhat in our ability to listen and our desire to listen and hear one another.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the book. And I know this was, not on our agenda to discuss, but as you are forthcoming about your reckoning, I hope that we can have further discussions about that, because we need folks like you who are honest about that and are coming up with ways for that reckoning to actually happen. You aren't the only one going through that. But to the book, My Old Kentucky Home. First of all, I always ask people when they do when they do really innovative and extraordinary things like this, perhaps even revolutionary things like this, when the bug bit them. So, like, when did you hear that song one last time and say,
I'm so
when
sorry.
did,
I'm back
no,
with
it's
you.
a problem. No problem. When did you hear that song? Somebody's calling you to tell you not to talk about this. When somebody from Kentucky. When did you hear that song for the last time and say, nope, I can't do this anymore. I need to write about and inform people what this really is. How did that come about for you?
Well, Reverend Mark, I think it would be great to just, I'd like to make sure that people at the beginning understand what this song is, because even a lot of people who come from, our Black community aren't totally aware of what this song is about. So I'm just going to say this is a song about the horrors of the slave trade, right? There is nothing ambiguous about it if you look at the lyrics of it, the full original lyrics. Okay, so we're going back to the 1850s when it was written. It is that we all know, your audience knows, that is a part of history that involved the separation of families and broke millions of people's hearts and cost so many lives. It's a national atrocity, right? Okay, so this book, if you if you look at the lyrics that Stephen Foster, the author of the song, wrote in the 1850s, it tells of a man being sold for cash from Kentucky, sent downriver, where he will die in the cane fields of the Deep South, never to see his family or the people who loved him again. But he's also singing from the position of take me back to Kentucky, the happy home of slavery is kind of the way it's positioned. So the song is really complicated in that it contains the atrocity of the slave trade. It also contains this very glowing depiction of life in Kentucky under slavery on a plantation. So that's the really mixed up, complicated thing. And yet it's not that complicated, because how can a song that is about that even has its roots in that, how is it that our culture is so wound up and twisted that a song like that is sung in these celebratory moments? So everyone, you mentioned the Derby right at the beginning. We're about to have our Kentucky Derby, the 148th running, the longest running sporting event in this entire nation. And My Old Kentucky Home is this, like, it's like this emblematic tradition to sing it right as the horses step on the track. And everyone is super excited and everyone stands up. And a lot of people cry when this song is played and when they sing it. Okay, I mean, a lot of people, I have cried. I got to come clean there. But what is amazing here is, if you think about it, do people in Germany before soccer matches get up and sing songs about the Holocaust?
Mm.
Have you ever been to a cricket match in South Africa where they sing a song about apartheid?
I
mean, even an anti-apartheid song, I don't think they sing those either.
You're saying something, Emily. Ooh, okay.
It's the setting. It's the way that this has become this mass. How many songs do we sing in mass? I mean, there are only a couple, right? The national anthem, Lift Up Your Voice and Sing in some places, great one. But maybe Take Me Out to the Ballpark. There's this sense of communal, like rush of emotion when this song is played. And it's not just the Derby, it's football games, basketball games, high school, college, formal events, weddings, but I do want to shine the light on the biggest one, which were over 150,000 people together experience this old song about the slave trade.
So now, just to be clear, when they sing it, because I don't remember, when they sing it at the Derby, do they sing all the lyrics, the darkies and all of that? Do they say that out loud still?
So what happened is this song in every verse contained the word that you just used, which explained who was being talked about, right, in 1853 and onward. But over the years, a lot of Black people didn't like that word, and they made it, they tried to get the song banned, and we can go into that later. They tried to use it in ways that were more dignified somehow. But ultimately, after, I would say, about 100 years of saying we don't really like this, eventually, slowly, that word was dropped and substituted for things like people or folks or something. And so what is sung today is the sun shines bright on the old Kentucky home. 'Tis summer, the people are gay. The corn tops ripe and the meadows in the bloom, and the birds make music all the day. The young folks roll on the little cabin floor, all merry and happy and bright. By and by, hard times, comes a knocking at the door. Then my old Kentucky home, good night. So who knows when they're singing this, what that's about?
Yeah, the people and what you're saying is, so literally what that song is talking about is the young folks are Black people, right?
The little cabin floor.
Right, run around the floor, and then there's a knock at the door to sell them off from their families. And everybody's singing that, and most folk don't even realize what it is they're singing.
And even when that first verse had just the D word that you used in there, people then knew it was kind of about slavery, but obviously that is a whitewashed depiction of slavery. Okay. But then when that D word gets taken out and substituted, something else happens. I think what happens to the song starting in the 1950s and moving, it didn't change until the 1970s at Churchill Downs, where the races run. And it didn't change in the state of Kentucky officially until the 1980s. But just saying, say the people who don't remember or forgot it was ever there, those people are able to sing a song in which slavery, which was its subject, is ghosted, like just ghosted.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, being ghosted, as a matter of fact. It's so, yeah, we gotta do something about this. Obviously. The other thing about this is, even the event Churchill Downs does not represent or the patrons there. These we're talking about still to this day pretty much a privileged class of folk, aren't we?
It's a complicated thing because Churchill Downs once had segregated grandstands and clubhouse where only white people could attend. Those days are gone. Tickets to the Derby are expensive if you're going to sit in the nice seats and, however, there's another option for people to go to the Derby. It's called the infield. And that's where about 50, 60, 70,000 people get together and have a party. And it's not the same as the, clubhouse, jockey club, set up. It's just a big old flat expanse where people are enjoying hopefully a beautiful day. And it's kind of rowdy at times, but it only costs, $40 or $50. But there is a long history of Churchill Downs in this city seeming and having a reputation of not being a very welcoming place. That goes back, for Black citizens, that, goes back to, yes, the tickets can be expensive. Yes, there was a time when Black people were not welcome. Absolutely. And yes, Black jockeys were, completely run out of this sport that they literally dominated at the turn of the century, the turn of the 20th century. So 120 years ago, more or less, a space in this nation that had room for Black excellence and equal earnings professionally was shut down for that demographic. So that left a scar in the Black community as well. So Churchill Downs and other racetracks have plenty to talk about when it comes to race. But, you know, and certainly class-wise, there's a lot of money that's sliding around in this community during Derby week. That's part of what, I mean, that is our brand, man. That is how millions and millions of dollars and businesses make their money. Down to the parking, people who let people park in their yards, to the hotels, to the, restaurants, all of it.
Was there a relationship between the prevalence of Black jockeys and the singing of the song? I mean, you almost had to wonder whether it was some type of balance of compensation. People seeing Black jockeys on the field at Churchill Downs and singing this song while they're out there riding horses. Do we know whether or not that has it? And also too, is this the official anthem of the state?
Yes. Okay. So great questions. Yes, this is the Kentucky state anthem, and it was adopted in 1928. So this is also important. The song was written by a Northerner from Pittsburgh who was writing for blackface minstrel shows and to sell sheet music. So this isn't even a Kentucky product. And my point in bringing it up in response to your question about the association with like Black jockeys and Kentucky and the Derby is it didn't actually get adopted in Kentucky until the 1920s. And it was a gradual thing. It was seen as an opportunity to kind of revamp the state's image into something more gracious and appealing to tourists than the sort of wild Kentucky feuds, gun-toting, mountain people or something. So this is all about marketing. I firmly believe, and for 100 years, Kentucky has had this as its brand. So in terms of timeline, your question regarding the exclusion of Black riders in the Derby, and also all Black horsemen, trainers, owners, it became extremely difficult for them to continue their work. But that was actually pretty well complete by the time Kentuckians had the brilliant idea of taking this old minstrel song and lifting it up into the sort of enshrining it the way it has been done here in the state for 100 years.
And
it was Jim Crow, right? It was Jim Crow.
Yeah, Jim Crow. And yes, it was a song meant to be performed by minstrels and in minstrel shows. Tell us what you know about the author, right? Stephen Foster, I believe now. He was, if I'm not mistaken, Mitch McConnell's father.
Oh man!
I couldn't. I said that y'all. Emily didn't. Me being bad.
Could draw a straight line between himself and Stephen Foster. I bet he would have done it. But Mitch McConnell is on the record on this. He said 2 years ago that it would be a terrible, terrible thing to ever separate this song from the Derby or anything in this state, because it is such a deep and profound and positive part of our traditions, our culture here in Kentucky. He and I don't see eye to eye on that question. But you asked about Stephen Foster. I don't know about his genealogical relationship to Mitch McConnell, our long 36-year senator. But he was a guy. He was born in 1826, and he died in Pittsburgh. He died in New York in 1864 with 37 cents in his pocket. He was the child of aspiring middle-class people and professionals, but his family had a lot of ups and downs financially, which a lot of Americans did. Even slaveholders had ups and downs. So anyway, he was struggling at times, and so were his parents. But he did not want to knuckle down and get a proper job. Instead, he did a little bit of work on the Ohio River where his brother owned a shipping company. And you can imagine in the 1840s in Cincinnati what he saw there, right? We saw cotton, we saw slaves, we saw industrializing America building on both of those things. But he had a knack for music, and he'd been playing around with music since he was a little kid. We don't know what he thought in his heart of hearts because he didn't leave us a diary. But we do know that he was writing songs, and that he also played in little blackface minstrel show himself as a kiddo. Thought that was fun. Blacked Up, sang Coal Black Rose and other songs, Longtail Blue, that were extremely popular. And I think your listeners are probably pretty familiar that, this was the dominant musical form of the time, right? If rap music is our dominant form of the time, blackface minstrelsy was in the 1840s and 50s the thing. It just was the thing.
Yeah.
And that was how he could make money.
Yeah. And I always like to, when I taught, broadcast and broadcast history in school, people always find it jarring. When Emily's talking about, folks didn't just, it was an evolution. I mean, it was a progression. To this day, the most popular radio show in history and the most popular television show in history was Amos and Andy. And just to show you how pervasive it was, as she writes in the book, Black performers sang My Old Kentucky Home. Black people watched Amos and Andy. I mean, it was when the NAACP came out against Amos and Andy, there were those in the Black community that didn't agree, because that's all we knew. That's all anybody knew. That was unfortunately the entertainment of the hour. But here's the other thing. Here's the other bombshell in your book that many people may not know. There were more Kentuckians in the Union Army than the Confederacy. Is that accurate?
That's right. That is right. And especially, when we also take into account all the African-American enlistees who joined the Union in Kentucky by the thousands and thousands and thousands. This was the second highest enrollment for Black Civil War soldiers after Mississippi, which obviously Mississippi has a far, far higher population of enslaved people than Kentucky ever did, actually. So that says a lot. Yes, but Kentucky had more people on the side of the Union, even white people, than on the side of the Confederacy. And a lot of people think that and try to write about the surprising argument, and I think this is pretty well accepted, that Kentucky kind of joined the Confederacy after the war.
And I think that was the case. I mean, let's face it, and I'm sure you're a historian, you know this better than me. I think we're finding that a lot of the zeal and fanaticism for the Confederacy was after the war. The hagiography, if you will, of what the Confederacy was, the sentimentalism that didn't exist at first, and now it's become in vogue, unfortunately. Oh, to say I was, my family was in the Confederacy, which is utterly insane. This, folks, is an important piece of work, and maybe we should renew this movement to do something about this song. I live in New York, as many of you know. I live across the street from Yankee Stadium, which is my second home. And when the story came out, I didn't know that Kate Smith had been involved in some racist behavior. So, at every ball game they sing "God Bless America" and "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And when they found out Kate Smith's history, Yankee Stadium stopped playing Kate Smith's version of "God Bless America." Thankfully, that's the space we're in. And it wasn't a movement. It was just, it came out online, and the Yankees said, we're not even going to get into that. We're not even going to wait for somebody to do a protest. So, folks, we need to perhaps think about, are there still people out there kind of mobilizing and saying that something should be done about this song?
I'm really hoping the book has that as one of its effects. The reality, Reverend Mark, is just so few people know what we're talking about today. The understanding, the level of awareness is just not there yet. And in terms of members of the Black community, this has been brought up year over year over year, but not by, I would say, in an organized way. And
Right.
and to be perfectly frank, I take the position that for this to change and really for the right thing to do is for white people to carry that banner. This is a song that was created by and for white people about an imaginary, mythic, stereotyped, cruel, and damaging image of Black people. And it was created for the amusement, pleasure, enjoyment, and sentimental, sort of release, right? Those tears. We're talking about those tears, that sentimental release for the benefit of people who were not Black, but yet on a story of immense Black pain. And in the whole history of civil rights movement in this country, there have been threats to Black human beings and their ability to hold a job or go into a certain place or travel or vote, obviously, or be physically secure. And some of those we're still dealing with them. A song was, there was awareness that this was not, a great thing, that it was it was hurtful, it was annoying, but in the panoply of issues facing the Black community, this was not the most pressing, right? So my argument is that this is a step that white folks should be considering, that because it's something they created and have enjoyed, I also hope at the same time, if this step could be made, it opens up a door to an understanding of all the other things that are like woven into the DNA that are part of what makes me cry, or people I know cry, and that we just haven't understood. We have not.
Yeah.
We have not listened. And so if we could make this step, possibly, that would be a way of demonstrating a tip of an iceberg that is part of the long work that we all have to do.
So I need a little. So in that vein, though, before we go, I need a little help. The sun shines bright in the old Kentucky home. That's how it goes, right?
You got it.
It's summer, the darkies are gay, and then skip ahead. The young folks roll on the little cabin floor, all merry, all happy and bright. By and by, hard times come knocking. So I'm going to understand the psychology of this. Is the singer emotional about his own property being sold off, or is this someone who owns us as property, but at the same time is kind of sad about what's going on? It's a little confusing what the emotion is. Do you have any insight into that?
I can give you my reading, and
Okay.
that's and one of the things about music, right, is it is very malleable, and Stephen Foster himself wanted that. I mean, he wanted to appeal to the broadest possible audience, right? So he actually took things out of this song in his earlier version that made it even clearer what was going on. The original song was called Old Uncle Tom Goodnight instead of Old Kentucky Home Goodnight. Lifting right out of the Uncle Tom's Cabin story of a man enslaved in Kentucky saying goodbye to his home in Kentucky and being shipped downriver. And I think it's helpful to, I think it's mostly written in the voice of that man being ripped from that home, that house, that cabin where things seem pretty happy, right? To a place that's much darker. And so the last verse goes, The head must bow and the back will have to bend wherever the D word may go. A few more days and the trouble all will end in a field where the sugar canes grow. A few more days for to tote the weary load, no matter, 'twill never be light. A few more days till we totter in the road, then my old Kentucky home, good night. And then Foster did something real interesting. He said, the chorus, weep no more, my lady. Weep no more today. We will sing one song for the old Kentucky home, the old Kentucky home far away. What do you think?
And that's kind of strange because it's almost as if a part of it is in the voice of an enslaved person.
Well, isn't that what blackface minstrelsy did, right? It took the voices of enslaved people and tried to like pretend it is literally impersonation.
And so for people to be singing in 2022 in that voice and then crying all over themselves about it, there's some, they need to put 150,000 people in group therapy for that. Who was I talking to the other day? A good friend of mine. Ironically, Tamika Mallory, who led a lot of the Breonna Taylor protests. She came to Louisville.
Yep.
Tamika just came back from Africa.
I saw that.
And one of the revelations she made, Emily, when she called me just the other day, and she said, Mark, and this goes to your reckoning. And you're in the process. See, that's why everybody in Kentucky need to read this book so they can start processing this themselves. This injustice, slavery and its ongoing vestiges, have not only harmed African Americans, but have harmed white people too. It at a bare minimum created this psychosis. I mean, really, somebody ought to get on a loudspeaker before they open the gates and say, "Do y'all know what y'all just saying?" Just say that. And leave it there, and then wonder what people will be like. Wait a minute, what did we just say? A lot of times we get in a group situation and we just do things because that's what everybody else is doing. But maybe folk need to just be asked, do you really have any idea? Somebody ought to buy your book and pass it out for free. 250,000. Who can we get? Y'all, we're gonna find somebody. We need to find somebody to buy her because I want her to get her money. We'll find that book and leave it on every seat. in Churchill Downs, and then it would get even more publicity.
Somebody said they might get a billboard going. I don't know if it's happening. That would be good.
Yeah.
Tamika and her group did a great job with billboards after the Breonna Taylor. That was a big one. Yeah, and in the city of Breonna, I'm so glad you brought up Breonna Taylor. I don't know if you did earlier. This is super important. This is Louisville, Kentucky. We had 9 months of every single day protests. We had someone killed by the National Guard, who's a beloved, member of the community who fed his barbecue to police and neighborhood kids and everybody just because something got out of hand after the curfew that had been put into place in our city. And we are a wound here, Reverend Mark. It is such an open wound right now, and we need healing. What could be a better gesture of healing than to take away something that one Black friend of mine, who was a member of the group of kids who sat in on our 4th Street, where all the shopping was done, all the restaurants were. She did that as a kid, and she has looked at me in the eyes and said, "Why? My family could never stand up for that song in all these years." She said, "Why? Why do you love it so much?" And I think this book can help us, find out why, but also why we don't have to hold on to traditions that don't work anymore for us as a society. No, and this, I believe, is one.
And no, we definitely shouldn't. And as my audience knows, you know, the song A Choir produced for Breonna Taylor has been this show's theme song ever since she was taken from us. We call her name every day on this show in the opening and the closing of the show. Folks, this is a very important book that you should read, that others should read. And this book is even more valuable now as a result of the war against education and knowledge and CRT. So we invite you to check it out, spread the word, tell your family and friends about it. A great bit of summer reading for you from the author Emily Bingham, My Old Kentucky Home, The Astonishing Life and Reckoning of an American Song. Emily, thank you for joining us on Make It Plain.
I'm so honored. Great to talk to you.
And let's keep in touch too in your journey and your reckoning as well. Okay.
I am so glad to make your acquaintance. I mean, this is great. And I truly feel this is a book for white people to hopefully hear, but I am so honored that you have, seen it and you think it has some, add something positive to our discourse. And I will keep teaching, and we need, like you say, we do need people all over the country. You're in New York. We need people all over the country talking about and standing up. And there are more of us than we think sometimes. So we're going to keep doing it.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.